All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is my good friend Veronica Arreola. Veronica is a feminist, an activist, and a blogger. You can find her work at vivalafeminista.com. You can also follow her on Twitter at Veronica I. Veronica, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Oh, thanks for having me back.
All right, so Veronica, you actually have an essay in a new book entitled Love Her, Love Her Not, The Hillary Paradox. Before we get into your specific essay, why don't you tell us about the book as a whole and what it's all about?
So a friend of mine, Joanne Bamberger, had this great idea to collect a bunch of essays from women who were on the, as I like to say, the Hillary supporter spectrum, from big fangirls to people who have a little bit of hesitancy about her, to even people who didn't like her very much. Mostly because Joanne had noticed that not just the sexism that goes around Hillary Clinton, but how it comes out as this double-edged sword, has like higher expectations that we all have, especially in the media, has of Hillary Clinton, that she has to be super nice and smart and funny and pretty, and just all of these things that just add up to this super high bar that nobody could overcome. And I think that part of the idea was also to try and get some of us to dig into those criticisms and challenges we have with Hillary Clinton without diving into that sexism pool.
Yeah, and as someone who, as we were talking before, as someone for myself who kind of falls on the love her not spectrum, as anyone who watches my show and sees my posts kind of know, I absolutely 100% acknowledge there is some horrible sexist crap when it comes to Hillary Clinton. I mean, some of the attacks are so horrible. Like and not even talking, and there's so many horrible things against her that not even mainstream media. One thing that just personally for me, I posted a few months ago something about her Wall Street ties, and some random Facebook person who I don't actually know was like, yeah, screw that bitch. And then I'm like, God damn it, no, this is not, that is, you can actually discuss this stuff without being a horrible sexist pig. And there's so much institutionalized sexism. As someone who doesn't really support her, I completely acknowledge there is horrible institutionalized sexism against Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, so I think that part of the purpose of the book and some of the essays is about trying to look critically at Hillary Clinton, her as a person, as a politician, her policies, without diving into that wretched pool.
Yeah. Well, let's get to your specific essay in the book. The essay is entitled Inspecting Hillary's Privilege Knapsack. So why don't you start out, explain by what you mean by privilege knapsack.
Excuse me. So I went to see Hillary Clinton speak. I've only heard her speak a couple of times in person. When the Clinton Foundation had their global conference here in Chicago a few years ago, and I was super psyched because I do acknowledge I am a Hillary fan, so I went there and was listening to her, and I was nodding along like, yep, tell it, because she can get on these moments. She has these moments of, I like to think, feminist brilliance, where she's connecting all the dots about economics and choice and healthcare, education, empowerment. And then she went somewhere where she was talking about how we have to support expectant mothers and newborn children, but then took it to a place where she was basically saying that poor pregnant women didn't know better than to not eat healthy and to not go to the doctor and to not give their newborn children healthy foods. And just, it was such an exhibition of white privilege, of classism, of her having what we might say is really great intentions, but not having it grounded in not even just intersectionality, but reality. Like how far removed she is and it shows us how far removed she is by what she says, by how she frames issues. And so then afterwards, I wrote up an essay that ran on The Broadside, which is Joanne Bamberger's women site and women's news site, and so then I revamped it a little bit for the anthology.
One of the things. Go on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so one of the things in the essay you actually write about, which I think this is a really interesting point on this, is you write about you had a college professor who actually changed the way you looked at the way of quote unquote empowering girls and women. So talk a little about that there.
Yeah, it was a professor in grad school who would often tell us, I think every class he had a new word, and I don't think he ever planned it out because he wasn't like that. You couldn't. He had a new word where he didn't like to have us use them in our essays, and if we did, we'd have to really use them carefully. So he really pushed us to look at better words, and we could almost never use the word interesting because he's like, what does interesting really mean? And so empowered was one of those words. And he broke it down about how you can't empower somebody. You could try to offer them resources that people have power within them. But they can only go so far depending on their circumstances. And so if you are going to, quote, empower somebody, you really need to be helping them obtain services, break down barriers that may be in front of them, things like that. So it really removed that idea of empowerment from the savior complex that I think a lot of people have, but may not acknowledge.
Yeah, no, true. And the whole idea of not grasping that people don't have schedule flexibility, they don't have sick days, they don't have parental leave, they don't have all these type of things. Like just trying to act like it's somehow they don't have, there's food insecurity, right? You write about that too, how like there's not actual, a lot of people don't have in poor areas don't have access to like fresh fruits and vegetables, and also fruits and vegetables are really expensive. If you only have X amount of money, buying healthy food is actually hard. If you have X amount of money to feed your child for a month, sometimes you have to make a worse choice just to actually have nutrients in your child's stomach.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are definitely foods out there that are for curing hunger, not for nutrition.
Yeah.
And to acknowledge those sorts of, I guess you could say they're nuances, but the realities of situations that a lot of us are trying to work on. So if we are going to have healthy moms and healthy babies, we need to do more than just create a pamphlet and an awareness campaign to breastfeed until they're 1 year old, but to acknowledge, as you just said, all those factors that go into being unable to breastfeed. And with the recent new larger conversation about what's going on in Flint, Michigan, there's a lot of attention on the fact that the children who have been impacted the hardest in the water contamination are low-income children whose parents probably aren't able to breastfeed because they need to go back to work right away, or they are working 3 jobs a day, who are being fed formula. Formula is a fine alternative to breastfeeding unless you're in Flint using contaminated toxic water.